She was 24 and ruined. Not the kind of ruined where you skip a latte and make do. The kind of ruined where you pawn your grandmother's wedding band for grocery money and eat cold rice with soy sauce because you can't afford the electricity to cook. And with $1, she bought an abandoned train station in a forgotten town in rural Kentucky. The windows were blown out. The platform was sinking. The Department of Transportation had been trying to unload the property for 19 years. But what nobody knew was that inside the old baggage room of that abandoned station, behind a door that hadn't been opened since 1994, was something that would rewrite her life. Maya Chen grew up in Dayton, Ohio, in a narrow shotgun house on the east side, where the freight trains rattled the windows at 3 a.m. Her father, Jin, had been a railroad signal technician for CSX until a maintenance accident took 3 fingers and his pension. Her mother, Rosa, cleaned houses for families in Oakwood until her knees gave out, then took night shifts at a commercial laundry, folding hospital sheets until 6 a.m. They were the kind of family that never missed a payment but never got ahead, that kept the thermostat at 62 in winter and bought clothes at Goodwill with the tags still on from the original owners. Maya was her father's daughter in the ways that counted. She had his hands, small, scarred, clever with wires and mechanisms. She had his memory for sounds, the ability to hear a failing transformer or a misaligned switch from 50 yards away. She had his silence, too. The Chen family didn't waste words. They fixed things, endured things, waited for the next problem to arrive. Jin had taught her to read schematics before she could read novels. By 12, she could troubleshoot a relay circuit. By 15, she was helping him with side jobs, rewiring porch lights and garage doors for cash. By 17, when the diabetes took his eyesight and then his job, she had taken over entirely, finishing the work he could no longer see to complete. After Jin died, Maya kept working. She got a job as an electrician's apprentice with a contractor named Delray who had known her father from the rail yards. Delray was 60, widowed, patient. He taught her commercial code, industrial systems, the math of load calculations that her father had never had time to explain. She was good at it. She was especially good at the diagnostic work, finding the fault in a system that everyone else had given up on. Her supervisors trusted her with the hard jobs. The other apprentices asked her to check their work. For the first time, she was somewhere that made sense. Then her mother got sick. Not suddenly. Rosa had been declining for years, working through the pain, hiding the blood in her handkerchief. By the time Maya forced her to a clinic, the ovarian cancer had metastasized. The doctors spoke in weeks, not months. Maya quit the apprenticeship to care for her. She moved back into the shotgun house, slept on a cot in the kitchen so Rosa could have the bedroom, and managed everything: the hospice equipment, the morphine schedule. The calls from relatives in California, who offered thoughts and prayers but no money. She learned more about the American healthcare system in 6 weeks than in 4 years of trade school. Most of what she learned was that dignity had a price tag, and they were not wealthy enough to afford it. Rosa died on a Thursday morning in early May, 2 days after Maya's 24th birthday. Maya was holding her hand, feeling the pulse fade like a train disappearing around a bend. After the funeral, Maya was alone in the house for the first time in her life. The rent was paid through June. The disability checks had stopped. The medical debt was a number too large to comprehend, already in collection. She sold the tools to pay for the cremation. She sold the furniture for pennies. She sold her mother's gold bracelet, the one Rosa had saved 40 years for, to a pawn shop for $220, less than half its value because she had no receipt. When she finally left Dayton on the 1st of July, she had a backpack, her father's old leather tool roll, a duffel of clothes, and $67 in her checking account. She caught a Greyhound heading south because south was cheaper. She ended up in a town called Millhaven Crossing, Kentucky, population 287, because that's where her money ran out. Not literally the last dollar, but close enough. She had $23 when she stepped off the bus in Millhaven Crossing, which was not a scheduled stop. The driver had pulled over for a mechanical issue and announced a 2-hour delay. Maya walked into the town's only cafe, a converted freight depot with a neon open sign that buzzed, to use the bathroom and escape the heat. By the time she emerged, the bus had left without her. She wasn't certain whether she'd missed it deliberately or by accident. She sat in the cafe for 3 hours, drinking coffee she couldn't afford, looking out at the main street of Millhaven Crossing. The town was evaporating. That was visible immediately. The buildings were brick, handsome, 1890s architecture with limestone trim and tall windows. But half were empty, 4 lease signs sun-bleached to illegibility. The hardware store had closed. The pharmacy had closed. The bank had closed and become a check-cashing place that had also closed. A water tower rose at the edge of town, still functional but surrounded by chain-link fence with rusted warning signs. And at the end of the street, where the road crossed the abandoned rail line, stood a long brick building with a curved roof and a platform that sagged toward the gravel bed. A stone pillar at the corner read L and N Railroad 1892. The windows were empty sockets. The platform was colonized by saplings, but the structure was beautiful. Red brick, limestone quoins, a cast-iron canopy over the platform that had once sheltered passengers waiting for the Cincinnati train. Maya stared at it for a long time. She was 24 years old and down to her last $23, and she was staring at an abandoned building because staring was easier than deciding what to fail at next. The server, a man in his 50s with a gray ponytail and a name tag that read Cal, came by with the coffee pot and offered a refill. Maya declined. She was rationing. Cal set the pot down anyway and slid into the booth across from her, uninvited. "You look like you're solving something complicated." Maya pointed at the station. "When did that close?" Cal followed her finger. "That old thing, 94, I think. Last passenger train stopped running in 71, but they kept using it for freight until the line went bankrupt. State bought it in 2005, tried to make it a heritage center, ran out of money. Been for sale ever since." "For sale?" "Technically, Department of Transportation surplus. My cousin Renee works in the county land office. She says they'll take $1 for it just to stop paying property taxes, but you got to be half crazy to want it. Building's been empty 30 years. Foundations shot, roofs shot, everything's shot." Maya looked at the station. $1. She thought about her $23. She thought about having nowhere to sleep tonight. She thought about Delroy back in Dayton, who had offered her the apprenticeship back whenever she was ready. But Dayton held too many ghosts now, and she wasn't ready to face them. She thought about her father's tools in the leather roll beside her, and her mother's bracelet, which was gone, and the 6 weeks she had spent learning how systems failed and how they could sometimes be repaired. She thought about what it meant to own something, to really own it, not rent it, not owe it, to possess a building that nobody could take from her no matter what happened. Even if it was a building in a town that was disappearing, even if the building itself was dying, even if she slept in it alone with the windows blown out and no power and no water. Owning something meant having a place to stand. "Where's the county land office?" Maya asked. Cal smiled. 2 blocks down past the empty bank. "You want me to call Renee?" "Yes." "Please." By the time Maya walked to the county building, Renee was already pulling up the file. Renee was a stout woman in her 40s with reading glasses on a beaded chain and a methodical way of explaining bureaucracy. She walked Maya through the process step by step. The station was listed as surplus state property. The title had transferred to the county in 2011 after failed development proposals. Since 2015, it had been available for a nominal fee of $1 to anyone assuming the tax obligation and bringing the structure up to code within 24 months. "The catch is the code," Renee said. "If you can't get it certified safe in 2 years, it reverts to the county. 3 people have tried. First one gave up when the estimate for the platform restoration came in at $18,000. Second one ran out of money fixing the roof. Third one just disappeared, left the keys on my desk one morning." "How much was the platform estimate really?" Maya asked. Renee looked at her. "You know something about construction. Electrical, some structural. My father was railroad." Renee studied her for a long moment. Then she pulled out the form. Maya signed the papers that afternoon. The process took 50 minutes and ended with Renee handing her a heavy brass key attached to a steel fob engraved with L and N Station 4. The key was substantial. It had the weight of something that had locked and unlocked 1,000 times a day, then not at all for decades. "Good luck," Renee said. "I mean that sincerely." Maya walked back to the station. She stood on the cracked sidewalk. There was no sidewalk, only gravel and weeds, and looked up at the building. It was larger than she'd thought. A long brick hall, maybe 40 feet wide and 80 feet long, with the curved roof rising to a clear story of dusty glass blocks. The stone pillar, the empty windows, the sagging platform. She put the key in the lock. The lock was stiff, but it turned. She pulled the door. It groaned on hinges that hadn't moved in years, then gave way. The smell hit first. Old wood, old metal. The particular silence of a public building that had been empty for decades, but never surrendered to nature. A smell of coal dust and machine oil, and the chemical ghost of whatever had preserved the floor. Inside was what had once been the waiting room. A long wooden bench ran the right wall, its varnish crazed with age. A ticket window with an ornate brass grill stood at the far end, the glass still intact, the counter inside littered with debris. To the left, a cast-iron stove sat on a stone hearth, cold for 30 years. The floor was tile, small hexagons in cream and forest green, dulled but still beautiful. The ceiling was pressed tin, painted cream, with a single chandelier hanging in the center, its crystals dulled to opaqueness. A water fountain stood against one wall, porcelain stained brown with rust. Past the ticket window, through a swinging gate in the brass grill, was the back area. Baggage carts, their rubber wheels perished to crumbles. A wooden desk with a manual typewriter. A pegboard where conductors had hung their caps. And at the far end, set into the wall, was a heavy steel door. The baggage room. Maya walked to it slowly. The door was what she expected, squat, gray, painted with stenciled letters reading railroad property authorized personnel only. A lever handle, not a knob. A hasp for a padlock, though no lock hung there. She tried the lever. It turned. The door wasn't locked. Maya stood for a moment, staring at the unlocked handle. Then slowly, she pulled the lever, and the door swung inward on hinges that groaned but functioned. Inside was a steel-lined chamber, maybe 6 feet deep and 8 feet wide, with shelves along 3 walls. The shelves were not empty. On the right, canvas mail sacks. Dozens of them stacked floor to ceiling, leather drawstrings still tied, brass tags reading Railway Post Office. On the left, wooden crates, stenciled with routing codes, dates, destinations. On the back shelf, between the sacks and crates, sat a metal strongbox the size of a bread loaf, and beside it, a leather ledger, water-stained but intact. Maya lifted one of the mail sacks. It was heavy, 40-50 pounds. She carried it to the waiting room and set it on the bench and opened the drawstring. Inside were letters, hundreds. Bundled with twine, each bundle tagged with a date and a train number. She picked one at random, postmarked 1987, addressed to a soldier at Fort Knox. Return address, a mother in Cincinnati. Never delivered. She picked another. 1991, a business letter registered to a company in Louisville. Return receipt requested. Never arrived. She opened the second mail sack. More letters, the third. More still. Maya stared at the sacks, trying to understand. Then slowly she began to reconstruct. In the years before computerized tracking, before FedEx and email, the railway post office had been a mobile sorting system. Clerks worked in specially equipped train cars, sorting mail en route, dropping bags at stations for local delivery. When a station closed, the bags were supposed to be forwarded to the regional hub. Sometimes they weren't. These bags had been sitting in Millhaven Crossing since 1994, when the last freight agent had locked the door and walked away. 30 years of mail that had never reached its destination. Maya turned to the wooden crates. She pried the lid from the nearest. Inside, parcels. Wrapped packages, some in brown paper, some in cardboard tied with string. Shipping labels faded but legible. Dates from 1985 to 1993. Gifts, documents. Things people had entrusted to the railroad that had made it this far and no farther. She opened the strong box. Inside was cash, not paper money, silver. Morgan dollars, piece dollars stacked in paper tubes. And paper money too, old bills, hundreds and fifties and twenties, bundled with rubber bands that crumbled when she touched them. And a notebook. A small leather-bound book filled with handwriting in fountain pen. Maya opened it to the first page. My name is Theodore Vance. I was the last station agent at Millhaven Crossing, from 1978 until the line closed in 1994. I am writing this on my final day of employment. The Southern Railway has ceased operations, and I have been instructed to clear the station for transfer to state ownership. I have been through the baggage room in preparation for the transfer. What I found, I cannot in conscience send to the regional office in Cincinnati, where it will be lost in warehouses or destroyed by indifference. The mail sacks contain correspondence that accumulated over years of service interruptions, storms, derailments, labor disputes. Letters that were delayed again, then forgotten in the chaos of a failing system. The parcels are worse. They are the unclaimed dead. Packages that arrived with insufficient postage, or damaged in transit, or addressed to people who had moved away when the mills closed. The railway was supposed to return them to senders. Often we did not know how. I kept them. Against regulations, against common sense, I kept them in the baggage room. I told myself I would sort them properly when things calmed down. Things never calmed down. The cash in this box represents unclaimed registered mail, money sent by wire before wire transfers were electronic. Drafts and orders that arrived but were never collected. I was supposed to remit them to the railway's general account. I did not. I am leaving everything here because I am 73 years old and have no children and no one to report my failures to. If you are reading this, you have somehow come to possess this building. The mail is not yours, but the responsibility for it is. Try to find the recipients. Many cannot be found. Those that cannot, well, you have earned the right to decide by being the person who opened this door. Millhaven Crossing was a good town once. It is a dying town now. Whatever you do with this station, remember that it was a place where people waited for each other, where they sent word ahead of their arrival, where they said goodbye before they left. The mail that never arrived is not lost, it is only delayed. Try to do right by the delay. Theodore Vance, June 30, 1994. Maya read the letter twice. Then she folded it carefully and held it against her chest and sat on the cold tile floor of the waiting room with the mail sacks and the parcels and the strongbox of silver and cash. And she cried for the first time since her mother had died. Maya did not sleep in the station that first night. She took the ledger, the strongbox, Theodore's letter, and one mail sack. She locked the building and walked back to Cal's cafe. Cal listened to the story while Maya ate a bowl of chili she couldn't afford. Then Cal called his sister, who ran a motor court on the edge of town, and arranged for Maya to have a cabin for 2 weeks at cost while she figured things out. The next morning, Maya returned to the station and began organizing. She sorted the mail sacks by date. She cataloged the parcels. She was surprised to learn that railway post office mail was federal property. Technically, she couldn't legally open or destroy it, but she could attempt delivery. And after 30 years, the statute of limitations on whatever regulations Theodore had violated had certainly expired. The cash was more complicated. She counted it roughly: $34,000 in old bills, plus the silver, which a dealer in Louisville later valued at $12,000. She used part of the money to begin renovation. The $18,000 platform estimate turned out to be $11,000 once she did the structural work herself, with Delroy's voice on the phone talking her through the calculations. The roof needed patching, not replacement. The electrical had to be entirely new, her specialty, and she did the work to code, pulling permits through Renee's cousin at the county. The plumbing was copper, salvageable with section replacement. The station had a dignity that modern construction lacked. Load-bearing brick walls, heart pine doors, a tile floor laid in 1892 by Italian immigrants who had pressed their thumbprints into the mortar. Maya resolved to preserve everything she could. But she spent more time on the mail than on the renovation. She went through the sacks, separating letters by decade, by destination, by possibility of delivery. She researched names using the Millhaven Crossing Historical Society's archives, census records, obituaries in the Louisville Courier-Journal. It was slow work. She spent mornings on construction and afternoons on research and evenings on the phone, tracking people down. Over her first year in Millhaven Crossing, Maya delivered 61 letters and 12 parcels. 61 out of nearly 800. She found recipients in Kentucky, in Tennessee, in Ohio, in Illinois. Some were the original addressees. Some were their children, receiving word from grandparents who had died decades past. Some letters were love letters, sent by soldiers to sweethearts who had married someone else while waiting. Some were business documents, contracts and deeds that had never been signed. One parcel contained a pocket watch, engraved, intended for a graduation that had happened without it. The reactions were the strangest part of her new life. People wept on phone calls. A man in Nashville drove 6 hours to collect a letter from his father, written the week before the father's death in a trucking accident, a letter the son had never known existed. A woman in Cincinnati received a parcel from her grandmother, a quilt, handmade, that had been mailed in 1989 and never arrived. The grandmother had died believing her gift rejected. Several recipients came to Millhaven Crossing to meet Maya, to collect their delayed mail and to thank her. The station became, unintentionally, a place where strangers arrived to receive news that was 30 years late. Maya opened the building to the public after 10 months. Not as a working station, that would have required federal agreements, but as something else. A kind of museum and community space, with the restored tile floor and the pressed tin ceiling and the brass ticket grill still intact. She named it the Millhaven Crossing Mail Room. She started a volunteer effort to find more recipients. The regional paper ran a story. Then, unexpectedly, a segment on Kentucky educational television that was picked up by NPR. The national story ran 8 months later. Within a week, Maya had received 600 emails from people who had family in Millhaven Crossing, who had ridden the trains, who had sent letters that never arrived. The effort grew beyond what she could manage alone. By the end of her second year, she had delivered 312 of the nearly 800 items. The rest she archived in climate-controlled storage, waiting, as Theodore had waited before her. She built an apartment in the former agent's quarters above the waiting room. She kept the ground floor as the mail room, open to anyone who wanted to sit on the old benches and watch the trains that no longer ran, and remember that this had been a place where people connected. Delroy came to visit after 14 months. He walked through the station, shaking his head, laughing, wiping his eyes. "Your daddy would have been proud," he said, "not for the money, for what you did with your hands." One evening in late October of her second year, Maya sat on the station platform and watched the sun set behind the water tower. The town was still technically dying. The population continued to fall. The school had closed, the students bused to the county seat, but something had shifted since the mail room opened. People came to Millhaven Crossing now. Not many, but some. They came for the mail room, for the story, for the chance to recover something they hadn't known was lost. They ate at Cal's Cafe. They bought gas at the one pump still operating. They stayed at the motor court. The money wasn't enough to save the town, but it was enough to slow the decline. Enough to remind Millhaven Crossing that it still existed. Maya thought about Theodore Vance, who had locked 800 pieces of undelivered mail in a baggage room because he couldn't bear to send them to a government warehouse. A man who had understood that the mail was never about paper. It was about the attempt. The moment someone sat down and wrote what they felt and trusted another person to carry those feelings across distance. Mail was faith made physical. And when the delivery failed, the faith didn't disappear. It waited. She thought about her father, Jin, who had taught her to listen to systems and be patient with broken things. About her mother, Rosa, who had held things together for 15 years after Jin's accident, who had made Maya rice and soy sauce and sat with her on the front steps of the shotgun house. About her own 6 weeks of hospice, which had felt like the hardest thing she had ever done, and which had, in retrospect, prepared her for this. For sitting patiently with old paper and tracing the threads of stories backward through time. That's the thing about mail that never arrived. It wasn't lost. It was delayed. Delayed for someone patient enough to pick up each envelope and ask, who was this meant for? And if that person is gone, who would have wanted to know what it said? The world is full of delayed things. Letters in baggage rooms, buildings in forgotten towns, people in rented houses who lost both parents before they turned 25. And sometimes, rarely, the delayed things find each other. The building waits for the person walks into the town. The baggage room unlocks with a turn of a handle that hadn't been locked in 30 years, because Theodore Vance, on the last day of his career, had decided to leave the door closed but not secured, so that whoever came next would not need a key they didn't have. Maya Chen was 24 years old and ruined. She had $1 to her name. She spent it on an abandoned train station in a dying town in rural Kentucky. It was the best dollar she ever spent.